You'd think at this stage, almost 100 episodes in, I would know how to work the recording software, but I don't.
Refuse to learn.
I could learn, but I don't want to. All right. Hey, you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and you are listening to the That Chapter podcast. And guess what? You've already heard his dulcet soprano, more like a castrato, I should say, like voice. Sitting across from me once again is Keith.
Heyo.
Heyo yourself. Right back at you, pal.
Thank you, man. Yeah, great to be here. I'm excited to be back. Really excited. Last time I was feeling a bit sick.
You were.
Yeah, so now I'm back up. I'm at 100%. So really looking forward to this. This is going to be a great one.
Yeah, we got some good ones for you. Well, it's one story. Its story is The Lords of Chaos. But we'll get into that in a sec. Let's just slow our roll for a second because I'm whipping out my phone here. I'm whipping out my notes because I have my conversation notes. Because, we have a lot of witty banter and good chats. But I figured...
We are hilarious.
Things happen to me. We are, I think. Hey, listen, I have a good time.
So.
I really feel like that's all that matters. But I decided to start writing things down to talk.
Okay, great. Okay,
give some structure to, because you know me, Keith.
Yeah.
Listeners do too. I'm kind of I describe myself as a whimsical fella. Sometimes I'm just walking around with my hands in my pockets and some strange ideas will enter this damn mind of mine.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to come to it next?
And if you don't write it down, it's gone.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was like, because I often think of, I'm one of those people who I do shit all week and it's like interesting stuff, but then as soon as you ask, what were you up to? Nothing.
Yeah.
I always I just blank.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh shit, yes. So I just want to start writing things down.
Right.
Okay. I also wanted to kind of structure the podcast a little bit. So, all right, general witty banter to introduce podcast. Take that off. Secondly is I want to bring up another recurring, it's going to be recurring now, segment of the podcast. I spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, was Mike's movie reviews.
Nice, okay.
Last time I believe I spoke of Hell House, LLC, and which I highly recommend. Did you watch it?
I haven't watched it yet. No.
I would recommend you watch it, and some other movie which I can't even remember what it was. So that's how good it was.
You didn't write it down.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I need the notes, people. Here, listen. It's. I need to stop saying that. By the way, here, listen. I realize I say that every two fucking sentences.
They're listening to the podcast. They are listening.
I know, they're already listening. But it is, as we were recording this, it is the start of September. It's spooky season, so I've been watching a hell of a lot of horror movies.
Right.
These days, it's a cold October coming up, baby doll. It's autumn. We're getting the pumpkins out. Spooky season is officially underway, and I thought it's good to do Mike's horror reviews so that the listeners, or perhaps yourself, Keith, if you're looking for a horror movie,
absolutely, yeah, always,
I'll give you a recommendation and I'll tell you about some of the movies I'm watching, because I've been watching a lot.
Okay,
I'll have to structure these days. I'll talk about some more in the next episode. But I found that horror movies are the only movies that actually keep me engaged nowadays. Every other movie, I'll a drama or action, I'll just zone out kind of. But horror movies, I'm locked in the entire thing. So here's some horror movies I've watched since we last recorded. Okay, so one, I'll go through them one by one. These are not in the order I watched them. One was called Milk and Cereal.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
No.
Okay, so this
what
is
are you
really,
watching these on, by the way? Is it Shudder?
No. All different. Some are on Shudder, some are just on whatever.
Okay.
So Milk and Cereal is actually quite interesting. It's a movie. It's on YouTube.
But a serial killer?
That's the thing. So it's Milk and Cereal, but cereal spelt like cereal, I guess.
That's so clever.
Yeah, it is. I was like, whoa, dude, when I seen it. But it's really, really interesting, though. It's a movie on YouTube. It's less than an hour long, and it's done by YouTubers. Like, just on that alone, I feel like people should just go out and watch it. Support local independent creators. But the thing is, I can't even remember their channel. It's just a movie they made called Milk and Cereal. Yeah. But they're two guys anyway. They make horror shorts and comedy shorts, and this is their latest one. So Milk and Cereal. I'll give you the basic plot. I'm doing that Turkish guy who dribbled the salt.
The Salt Bay.
The Salt Bay.
Yeah.
That's what I'm doing. Let the record show. So the story anyway is, to give you a basic outline of the plot, it's these two YouTubers who prank each other.
Okay.
And then the pranks keep escalating and escalating.
Okay.
And maybe there's some murder and stuff involved. And some tricksy serial killer stuff. It's done kind of like a found footage vlog style.
You love that stuff.
I do. I'm a sucker for fan footage, vlog movies. And if I see them, my favorite movie, one of my favorite movies and favorite horror movies, Blair Witch.
Blair Witch, I was about to say, yeah. I feel like that was your awakening for horror movies.
Yeah, that is just 10 out of 10 for me. So I'd highly recommend seeing Milk and Cereal. As I said, it's on YouTube.
Okay.
It's less than an hour long. Very interesting. I thought the acting and writing was quite good for, just some young fellas making it themselves.
I love those short horror movies on YouTube. I think there's a lot of them that are brilliant.
Yeah.
Really
I thought this was one of the better ones. There's a lot of twists and turns in it. Next one I watched. Okay, so this is kind of weird. I watched two religious movies.
Okay.
And I generally don't like religious horror movies.
Yeah.
One was The First Omen.
Oh,
Not the original Omen.
Someone
the
actually
movie's called The First Omen.
Yeah, someone recommended that to me. He said it was very, very good.
Well, rescind that recommendation.
So, 2 recommendations.
No,
oh, no,
I'm
it's
not
good?
recommending it. I'm just saying
okay.
I watched it.
Oh, okay.
By the way, so the horror movies I'm listing out, I'm not saying they're good. I just watched them. And I'm giving you my review now.
Okay,
Look in Serial,
yeah, good.
thumbs up.
Okay.
The First Omen, thumbs down.
Thumbs down, okay.
Although it's one of the only horror movies, or just movies full stop, I've watched in a long time that had me going, and like shielding the screen with my hands.
Oh, okay.
For any
it's more
person-
shock.
No,
gore,
there's
no?
just one. Not really. There's this one scene in particular. People who have seen the movie will know the scene, but it
Okay.
involves a hand coming out of something, and it was pretty horrifying.
Right, okay.
But other than that, no, it was shite.
Right,
I thought.
okay.
I didn't think it was a very good movie at all. But the other religious horror movie I watched was also not very good. It was The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe, yeah.
So
That looks
he's
kind of
great.
good. Yeah.
I like Russell Crowe.
I love Russell Crowe.
He's one of those actors. If he's in it, he's going to be good at least.
Yeah.
He
He's
doesn't-
kind of like with Tom Cruise. Like, whatever Tom Cruise in, like, whatever he touches, I'm like, gold.
Oh
Love
yeah,
it.
he's psychopath, but he makes good
Absolute
movies.
madman in real
Yeah.
life, but he makes killer movies.
He makes a good movie. Russell Crowe seems kind of same. It's weird, The Pope's Exorcist, because a lot of it kind of plays like a comedy.
Right, okay.
It's not scary at all. He's great in it.
Yeah.
He plays like this Italian exorcist. But it's funny, you know what else? He was in like 2 exorcism movies that came out in the same year, and he plays like an exorcist in both of them, I think.
Oh, what was your
Because I was scanning through, I think it's just called Exorcist. I was scanning through, like,
Okay.
I watched this movie and then I was scanning through whatever streaming service. And then another movie came up and it was just called Exorcism, and he was like dressed like a priest. And I was like,
Right.
oh, they got the title wrong. And it's like, oh no, it's a completely different movie. I don't know anything about the other one.
Yeah.
But that's just odd. So yeah, no, other than Russell Crowe doing a funny Italian accent, thumbs down on that one too. The next movie I watched was Trap with Josh Hartnett.
Oh, yes. That looks
The M.
great.
Night Shyamalan
That looks
movie.
really good.
I liked it for
Yeah.
the most part. Okay, the first 2/3 of it were quite good. The last finale of the movie is not very good at all. Although that's M. Night Shyamalan. Like, all of his movies are. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of his, but generally the endings fall flat on his
Okay,
movies. Like, just
yeah.
think of Signs. Great movie up until the end, and it's
Yeah.
water.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, this is dumb as shit. Trap kind of falls into the same trap, if you
Yeah.
will. But the first 2/3 of the movie, when he's in the stadium,
Yeah.
he's at his like a pop concert with his daughter. It's really good. I thought that was really cool, really unique premise.
Yeah.
Really original. And then the movie just kind of falls apart. But I would, if you got nothing better to do,
Yeah.
I would say stick it on.
Okay, midway thumbs.
Yeah, midway thumbs. So it's 1 thumbs up, 2 thumbs down, and then 1 midway thumbs.
Okay.
And then the final movie was Longlegs. I watched Longlegs.
Yes, I'm dying to see that. Yeah.
I was very, very excited for this movie. The people who made the trailers and did the marketing knocked it out of the park.
Please tell me it was good.
I was so excited to watch it, and I loved it. I would give it a 2 thumbs up for
Excellent,
Mike.
okay.
I really, really loved Longlegs. I thought it was fantastic.
Nice.
I loved everything about it.
Yeah.
It hit that perfect note for me as well.
Nicolas Cage looks great in it as well. Like, he looks real creepy.
He's pretty good in it. He kind of, I mean, it's Nicolas Cage just doing Nicolas. I was actually surprised. He's not in the movie that much at all.
Oh.
He's only really in it a little bit. I mean, I don't want to spoil it because
Yeah.
what's interesting. So I loved it. I was kind of surprised to see how many people disliked it, and it's
Yeah.
a lot of like people arguing. It seems to be a movie you'll either love or you'll hate.
Okay.
I loved it.
Yeah.
Some people really fucking dislike it.
Yeah. It's a bit culty, is it?
It's more so I think a lot of people went in thinking it's just a true crime thriller like Seven or Silence of the Lambs with like hints
okay.
of like a satanic killer.
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah.
oh no, Satan is like literally in the movie.
Okay, right,
you know,
cool.
like
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is a supernatural
Yeah.
movie.
Mr. Satan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mr. Longlegs, Satan. Surname Longlegs, first name Satan. But it is like the main character just is an FBI agent investigating satanic murders.
Yeah.
But
That's awesome.
Like
Yeah.
that's why I loved it. I was
mad.
like, oh, this makes the movie even better.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people that made them not like it.
Yeah.
The fact that
it's
they
too
thought
supernatural
it was,
or
they thought it was just gonna be a straight up
Yeah.
true crime thing about a
Yeah.
satanic killer.
No, that's
and
my
it's like,
jam.
but then it's like, oh no, actually, this is a proper supernatural movie. So I loved it. I thought it was great. It was one of those movies where me and my wife, the Warthog, we watched it and we were talking about it for ages.
Okay,
like
I
the
love those.
meaning and what happened here,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
it's like, how did this happen? Oh, like
Yeah.
who was responsible?
I love those movies that like the slow burners. You keep on thinking about it days
I
and
think
days
it would,
after.
It's a movie that would really reward rewatching.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 thumbs up for Longlegs, and that I think brings us to the end of Mike's movie reviews. All right, so I will bring up. I've got a lot more horror movies, and I'm going to be watching a lot more. So we will talk more horror movies in the next episode. But now, Keith, we got to talk about something that really happened.
Oh, gee. I forgot what we're doing here.
Yeah, I thought we were just talking about horror movies for next hour. All right, so today, folks, we are talking about the Lords of Chaos. Now, Keith, this is actually a story I mentioned to you, and you thought I was talking about something completely different.
I did, yeah.
Whenever I mentioned Lords of Chaos.
I did. I thought it was the Lords of Chaos. So there's a book called Lords of Chaos: The Bloody Rise of the Satanic Metal Underground. So that was published in '98, and that like explores the history and cultural impact of early Norwegian black metal scene.
Yeah.
And it focuses really like on extreme violent behaviour associated with some of the bands involved. One of the most notorious parts of the book is about how like members of some of these black metal bands in Norway, they burned down churches in the early 90s. One of the bands, there was a band called Mayhem. They were like one of the central figures in these events. But that's who I thought we were talking about. But when we got into the story, it's kind of very similar. A lot of like kind of edgy edgelords.
Yeah, I mean, a church does burn down at one stage in this story. There is death, there is murder.
Yeah.
This is more true crime clásico, though,
Yes.
in that it's about this young group of dumbass teens who gave themselves the name Lords of Chaos, but it does involve murder, manipulation, and a lot of weird shit.
Yeah, it's very strange. Yeah.
It's a very strange story. So, let's begin, folks. How about we just go back and begin right at the beginning? To tell you this story, we gotta get to the 90s, specifically 1996, when we got Spice Girls, Chicago Bulls, and fittingly, the movie Scream. All came out that year, which is very fitting for this story.
That was a great year for movies. Do you know what else? What I watched recently? Executive Decision. That was 96.
Which one is that?
That's the one with Kurt Russell, is it?
Oh, Kurt Russell's one of those. If he's in, it's pretty good.
It was very.
Wait, is that the one that begins with Steven Seagal?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
They're in the stealth plane.
Yeah,
he gets sucked out.
That's the one. It's so good.
That's the only scene I remember from that movie. I think I rented it from the video store in the 90s.
Oh man, you need to rewatch it. It's brilliant. It's so good. Yeah.
All right. Well, here, folks, and that's it.
We're back to movies.
We're back to movies. Now it's Keith's movie recommendation time.
Crucible was out that year as well, actually.
Oh, the Crucible. Oh, yeah.
Which is about Salem witch trials, which actually I have a lot to talk about.
Oh, God. Cut that. That is a good movie, though.
That was a good movie.
So it all begins, this whole story, not Keith's story, begins on April 12th, 1996, when a small group of friends set out on a night of petty teen vandalism. The little gang of mischievous brats reveled in their newfound outlaw status. The local papers covered the story of this mysterious teen gang, and despite the content of that coverage literally calling their work the product of, quote, obviously pea-brained vandals and, quote, persons of less than average intelligence and a cretin's personality, the pals, these teens, were super duper proud of their handiwork and decided not only were they gonna do it again, they were going to form themselves a badass militia with an equally badass name, and thus, the Lords of Chaos begun. The members of the Lords of Chaos, beginning with the core 4 founding members, were Kevin God Foster, Pete Fried McNaughty, Chris Slim Black, and Derek Mob Shields. God Fried Slim Mob. These are the shittest nicknames ever.
Why did Chris change his name? Like, his second name was already Black.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
They were often joined by the secondary members or part-timers. You got Chris Red Burnett and Thomas Dog Taroni. Finally, there were a couple of hangers-on, but sadly they didn't get their own call signs. You got Brad Young and Craig Lesh. So 18-year-old Kevin God Foster was very much the focal point and driving force behind the Lords of Chaos. Foster, pretty interesting character. He's more or less a central character in this story. And, well, it is also fair to say, though, he didn't have the easiest start to life. Born Kevin Donald Bates on June 16th, 1977 in Amarillo, Texas, his birth parents, John and Ruby, were never really stable and clashed constantly. Their turbulent relationship ended when John abandoned Ruby, along with Kevin and his half-sister Kelly, while Kevin was just an infant. So like I said, Kevin was born in Amarillo, but after John left the family, Ruby moved the family back and forth between Texas, Missouri, Arizona, Montana, and Florida, going wherever the work was. On one occasion, when the family were back in Amarillo, Ruby met and eventually married a man named John Foster, and John adopted Kevin at the age of 12, giving him the name he would make infamous 6 years later.
John Foster was actually her 4th husband.
4th. Wow,
Yeah.
she's collecting them like Pokemon cards.
Right, yeah. So I definitely say like these frequent changes in like parental figures definitely had some sort of effect on them. Well, we know they do, so.
Yeah, for sure. The family finally settled in Fort Myers, Florida, where Kevin would attend Riverdale High School. In his freshman year, Kevin met Pete McNaughty and would go on to become his number 1 pal and number 2 in the Lords of Chaos. 2! The easiest way to describe Kevin Foster is that he is basically what happens when you max out your charisma and intelligence stats, but forget to leave any over for morality and then just sort of fall asleep on your keyboard during the customize appearance section. He's a weird looking motherfucker.
Yeah, he is. He looks like a potato.
Yeah, he does, yeah. During his high school years, Kevin earned the not-so-affectionate nickname of Psycho. I love that.
Cool.
Yeah, they call me Psycho. His classmates just called him Psycho, and the nickname was thanks not only to his original surname, matching that of the antagonist of Hitchcock's classic, but also just to his general creepy demeanor. Most people would have, been at least a little bit maybe offended, but Kevin, nah, he was like, this shit rocks.
Yeah, he loved it. He really leaned into it as well. He even put Bates Motel vacancy sign on his bedroom door.
Really? He must have been really against the whole changing his name when he got adopted by John Foster.
Right.
He probably would have wanted to keep his original surname Bates. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And that was the thing, like with bouncing as well, like between like by the time he got here, he'd been bounced between like 5 states and dealing with like 4 different father figures. And he really wanted to figure out who he was and kind of where he came from. So he ended up looking up to these like fictional serial killers or legendary outlaws like Billy the Kid and Jesse James, and he saw a bit of himself in them. So he kind of took on the role of the anti-hero. He was like looking up to these.
Right, yeah.
Very strange guy.
So rewind 3 years, right from 1996. Let's go to April 19th, 1993. And over in the state of Kevin's birth, Texas, things were happening that would have a profound effect on not only Kevin himself, but American history. So what happened that day became known as the Waco Siege or the Waco Massacre. And it's too long a story to get into here, and I'm sure basically all the listeners, all you guys, you know it anyways. But just for the cliff notes, basically the whole deal started when a variety of federal agencies, FBI, ATF, etc., tried to raid the home/compound of David Koresh, who was the leader of a pseudo-religious group called the Branch Davidians. They believed in some crazy shit, but that wasn't what the Federals were interested in. They instead were concerned with the amount of guns that the group had. There was also allegations of ongoing abuse among the group, implicating Koresh in particular. The incredibly poor planning of the federal agents sent the situation south very quickly, and instead of a quick arrest while, Koresh was out and about, they tried to arrest him at home, leading to a standoff between the agents and David Koresh, his followers, and several members of his family. On April 19th, depending on who you believe, either the agents or Koresh opened fire, and the 51-day-long siege that began on the 28th of February ended in a bloodbath, leaving 4 federal agents and 82 of the Branch Davidians, including 28 children, dead. The majority of the carnage was broadcast and covered heavily on news channels. The sight of government agents burning down buildings with, literally dozens of children inside caused a large portion of the American population to have their already very shaky faith in the government pulled into a whole new level of suspicion and doubt, which I don't think ever has and maybe never will be repaired.
Most Americans and observers around the world watched what happened in Waco and felt shocked and upset with the action taken by the government agents. For others, it was the perfect excuse to go out and just create anarchy. Now they could blame authorities and call it, retaliation. The most famous example is probably Timothy McVeigh, who set off a bomb at the Alfred P. Murray Federal Building in Oklahoma City. He did it on the 2-year anniversary of the siege at Waco. The truck bomb detonation, it destroyed like almost half the building and murdered 168 people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And McVeigh, he was caught, tried, and ultimately executed for his crimes. But to any sane person, Timothy McVeigh, he was clearly, he was a monster who committed horrible acts of violence. But to Kevin Foster, he was a hero. Just like McVeigh, Foster, he decided to use Waco as an excuse to do whatever he wanted to do. Only now, with his twisted thought process, his actions would be somehow now legitimized.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like you talked about him, how he would look up to Billy the Kid. He also looked up to the Oklahoma City bomber and like David Koresh, like these actual literal psychopaths.
I know, not the best role models.
Yeah, exactly. These aren't like kind of cool, badass cowboys. These are like
aim higher,
monsters.
Kevin.
Yeah. So unfortunately, Kevin was a teenager, and that meant he was in the perfect place to find a stream of easily influenced idiots to help him. That was high school. So by most accounts, Kevin was pretty bright for his age, and he had a strong personality and a strong worldview compared to other kids. Most kids don't really give a shit or know anything, but Kevin was like, I'm going to tell you how things are done. He was also bigger and stronger and considered a bit of a tough guy. That combination of very shallow traits, it drew in a very specific type of teenage boy into his orbit. For a narcissist like Kevin Foster, having such ready access to easily influenced personalities, it's a very dangerous thing, and just like a good cult leader would, Kevin started small, getting his pals to aid him in the pettier acts of vandalism. We were escalating things higher and higher until starting small fires around town just couldn't anymore. And again, like Timothy McVeigh, he didn't really have a reason for doing it. He was just like, I'm going to just wreck shit for the sake of wrecking shit, because fuck everything, basically.
Just an arsehole.
Yeah, just an arsehole.
Yeah.
The escalation went fairly quickly. After the first night of smashing things up and starting fires, a few of the gang decided it would be just a great idea to set fire to a bus belonging to a Baptist church. After that failed, they went for a smaller but much more cruel target. The mighty militia set fire to a bird cage containing 2 macaws in the garden of a local team restaurant named The Hut. Fire sadly did kill one of those birds. What did the birds do to anybody?
Innocent birds.
On April 17th, Kevin decided the group needed a manifesto. Hey, listen, every good organization / cult needs a manifesto. And so he started writing one, which he intended to send to the Lee County Clerk Traffic Violations Bureau. Because if you gotta send it anywhere, you gotta send it to the people who give you parking tickets. He entitled it Declaration of War. Formal introduction of Lords of Chaos. So that formal introduction, no messing around.
I would say it's a good title.
It is
I'd read it.
It's not bad. It's not bad. In the end, though, the gang didn't send it to them. They sent it to a local rag, like shitty newspaper instead, where unfortunately the document wasn't taken seriously. Although, in fairness now, would you take it seriously? It probably wasn't even read at all. It was likely just tossed into a bin. Which sort of is a shame, because this manifesto had like some gold in it. Here, let me read you out a little quote here. Lee County is dealing with a formidable foe with high caliber intelligence, balls of titanium alloy, and a wicked destructive streak. Be prepared for destruction of biblical proportions, for this is the coming of a new God, whose fiery hand shall lay waste to the populace. The games have just begun, and terror shall ensue.
It's pretty good.
That is, hey, listen, 10 out of 10. The date of their next adventure was deliberately chosen to mark it as a tribute to both McVeigh and Waco. In the end, Big Kev and his little gang of misfit goons they actually missed the anniversary of Waco by a few hours, but that was when they committed their biggest act of destruction yet. And none of them really gave 2 shits about Waco. It was just about looking cool and any excuse to blow shit up. So, for the attention to continue, the group needed to make some big noise with a big target that would grab everybody's attention. For some reason, Kevin thought the perfect target would be a historic Coca-Cola bottling plant. The building was a 2-story, 12,300 square foot brick building in Fort Myers.
Did you ever go to the Coca-Cola tour when we were in school?
No, I didn't. There's a Coca-Cola factory here not too far from where we live.
Yeah. It was awful. It was really bad.
Really?
Well, the worst part was, so at the end of the tour, you think you got free Coke out of it? They had 2 cans to give out free to like 30 kids. So like they had like a quiz for it. But that's
Wait, what? They had 2 cans for
everyone.
For everyone. I thought it was 2 cans,
so like,
at least 2 cans each.
Yeah, so like we'll hold a quiz. So they gave out 2 cans to the 2 people that got the questions right.
Wow,
and then we all just went home empty-handed in. But like for a multi-billion-dollar company,
that sounds shite.
It's a bit scaldy, isn't it?
That's scammy.
I know, right?
Hey, listen, Coca-Cola, you're on our shit list.
Yeah, you're off the table.
Coca-Cola, wait, no, Diet Coke is already on the shit list, I think, because they have refused to pay my extortion. Who else? There's other things on my shit list, I've forgotten them, but I will get around to them, and they will feel my fiery wrath.
That's it, we're going to Pepsi.
In the early morning hours of April 20th, 1996, Foster and several other members of the mini militia decided it would be super funny to use a Pepsi can. Hey, our boys Pepsi. They used a Pepsi can stuffed to the brim with gunpowder and connected it to a 25-foot long firework fuse to trigger an explosion that pretty much decimated the entire building, causing over $100,000 worth of damage. The can of Pepsi powder was simply the trigger for the real heavy hitter though, as Foster had directed the others to place stolen propane tanks in various places he knew they'd do the most damage around the building. Kevin and his boys had nicked the tanks earlier that evening. The fuse took around 13 minutes to ignite the improvised explosive device, and then the boys watched from a picnic table across the street as the propane canisters went off one by one and blasted throughout the building. So far, the damage was limited to property and 1 macaw, but basically now they're destroying entire buildings, and at the rate Kevin was going, it was never going to be long before somebody got hurt. After all, it was likely more out of luck than intention that the Lords of Chaos hadn't already managed to injure or kill somebody, and including themselves, but thanks to the stunt at the factory, the boys had managed to attract the interest of the ATF, which never ends well for anybody.
Yeah, but this is exactly what Kevin wanted though. He wanted the Lords of Chaos to get the attention that they deserved for these crazy crimes, and he chose the Coca-Cola plant because it was the historical landmark for the whole town. Also, when the bombing happened, so the next day in the newspaper, they obviously reported, and Kevin said, "I told you it would make headlines. It's great. I jacked off all over it." How fucking gross is that?
Wow, that's something else. That's Big Kev for you. What'll he do next? So out of his little group, you got Pete McNutty, who was a talented artist and was physically small and weak, which is probably why he gravitated towards Kevin. He had something he didn't, and being his friend offered him protection. Pete and Chris Black were also good friends. Chris Black was a typical geeky kid, did well in school, and was never really in trouble. No one would have expected him to end up mixed up in a domestic terrorist group. Unlike Pete and Chris Black, who were due to graduate shortly, Kevin had actually already dropped out of high school. And like many people who feel pushed to the wayside by their peers, not being accepted in society, it sets kids like Pete and Chris up, to fall into these outlaw lifestyles. Loneliness is a powerful thing, especially when hormones are already all out of whack. Pete once wrote in a journal, "If you're a person of small stature like me, it helps to have big friends that have bigger guns that have a history of mental illness." That doesn't sound like a good thing at all.
That's not healthy.
Yeah. So it doesn't take a genius to work out who that friend was in Pete's life. Kevin, being a dropout, was in a great but very temporary position to appear very cool to other teenage boys. He had plenty of time to himself and no parental supervision. Kevin's mother, Ruby, she indulged him. She even supplied Kevin with guns. Enough guns that he could build himself a little arsenal. See, by this point, Ruby, she owned and ran a pawn shop. Meaning little Kev could basically have the pick of guns that came in, and he didn't have to worry about any of that pesky legal stuff. His former friends later estimated he had between 25 and 30 guns of all kinds. Yeah, that's a lot of guns.
What a mother.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, we'll see what she'll get up to later, because she does a lot more than just give him guns. So on April 26th, Kevin and Pete carjacked and robbed the owner of a local diner, Emery Lewis. Lewis, he was also the landlord of fellow Lords of Chaos, Derek Shields, and his mother. See, Shields, apparently he had a vendetta against Emery Lewis ever since Lewis referred to his mother as a bitch and poor white trash. Listen, come on, you never know. That was very much incidental though, and the group's real aim was just to steal the takings from the restaurant, only to find out that Emery Lewis didn't actually have as much as they expected. Not enough to commit a felony, anyway. And while I'm sure the experience was far from pleasant, Lewis was left physically uninjured in the robbery and his car got the worst of it.
Lewis, he did get off easy because in the initial plans, so they were going to shoot Lewis in the head and then decapitate him with a machete.
Nice.
And then put his severed head in a bucket of concrete and then dump it in the river. So that was their plan.
Wow, okay.
And then they got there and they were like, nah, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, he did get off pretty light as well. They didn't actually touch him at all. They just stole his car. On April 30th, the next step for the gang started out as more of a lateral move than another major escalation. Their intention was simple and a little quaint in the grand scheme of things: to steal clothes.
Ooh, lads, we're off the hot topic.
Oh, we're going crazy. In reality, however, the clothes were only step one in a much, much darker plan. Kevin had come up with the idea that he wanted to disguise himself as a Disney mascot and use the opportunity to murder any minorities he could. Kevin was also a racist bastard. See, the plan was to first steal clothes from a Dillard's clothing store in order to dress up and attend a school grad night, which was due to happen at Disney World in Orlando. While there, Kevin would sneak off and steal one of the mascot uniforms, then return to the park and commit what would have been an unspeakably devastating act of terror.
Initially, their plan had been to sneak into Disney World with the school, like I said, then get drunk, steal a Disney character costume, as you said. But the initial plan was just to run around kicking little kids in the butts and giving them wedgies. This is what he said. But then...
Very different to going around and executing any minorities.
Very different. But this is how quick it escalated. But then when it was asked within the group how we're going to get the costumes, they came up with, hell, I'll just hold them up at gunpoint in the bathroom and take their stuff. Then that escalated to, well, if you got their guns, why not just run around shooting people? And then they all found this really amusing imagery of the rescue rangers just coming out, running around shooting people. So that's what they went with.
Wow.
Just like, it really just highlights just how juvenile, and impulsive and explosively violent.
It's kind of like, just kids improvising like yes and. Yes
Yeah.
and we kill everybody. Okay.
I love it.
Thankfully, the whole thing went sideways from Act 1. In order to steal the clothes, the boys purchased an old smoke grenade from an Army-Navy store, and they planned to set it off with a piece of fishing wire and then use the panic as a distraction to run away with the clothes that they would have piled up in advance, and all would have went perfect, except the grenade didn't go off at all. So the boys were basically just left with their cocks in their hands, and in the end they gave up and left the store without stealing any clothes. And basically, they didn't go ahead with the plan at all. It's like they so easily come up with these plans that just keep escalating, and then one single thing goes wrong, and they're like, nah, fuck it, let's not do it.
That thing, they literally came across the very first obstacle, and then they gave up. Like, that's serious lack of perseverance.
Sounds like a whole thing. I mean, thank God for that, I suppose.
I don't see this group making with that kind of attitude.
No, they're not going to go far. So the Lords of Chaos decided that someone had to pay, though. If they couldn't get to Disneyland, they would find a new target. And that would be their school, Riverdale High School. They were going to trash the shite out of the place. Again, how they went from something so like mass murder to just, how about we just throw trash cans around the school? It's like so... It really does show how like stupid and dumb and young the little teenagers these guys were.
Chaotic. Lords of Chaotic.
Yeah, that's it. That's a better name. So, for Kev, he was the only one who went to the school who wasn't a student. Now, vandalizing the school should have been a stupid and costly thing to do, but ultimately it would have been a relatively victimless crime if it were not for someone being in the wrong place at the worst possible time. So, several of the gang, including Kevin, Pete, Derek Shields, Chris Burnett, Christopher Black, and Thomas Taroni, they went on a rampage throughout the school, stealing several random items, including gloves, staplers, a fire extinguisher, for some reason a can of peaches.
Cool, peaches.
Yeah, hardcore, dude. Foster even filled a Clorox bottle with petrol, attached a burning rag, and threw it through the auditorium window. Essentially, they're wrecking the school, making shite of the place, but nothing terribly crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's shitty, but, compared to what they were going to do.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, 32-year-old Mark Schwebes, the school band director, he was leaving the school and he had seen the boys as they were hanging around outside with the pilfered items. Mark saw them, he went over, he saw the items they'd stolen, and he confiscated them. Since he didn't recognize Black and Taroni as being students at Riverdale, he told them not to be surprised when they got a visit from the police in the morning.
Chris Burnett, he was a little different to the other Lords of Chaos. So as well as being besties, Kevin saw Chris as more on his level, as like a fellow general giving orders. But Burnett and Kevin they'd have their private chats about girls, smoke cigarettes, just generally, growing up together. But Burnett, he clearly grew up a little bit quicker than Kev. And when the murder talk started, Burnett, he just walked away. He's like, nah,
I'm out.
It's too much. It's too heavy.
So it kind of just shows, though, like, Mark just seeing these kids hanging out, he's seen a conversation, just took their stuff. Like, he wasn't scared of them at all. He just thought these were some dumb teens, vandalizing the place. He didn't give a shit.
It's like, oh, my peaches.
But sadly for Mark, he underestimated the psychotic lengths someone like Kevin Foster would go to in order to not have their grand peach theft uncovered. What should have been the boys just simply getting a slap on the wrist. Instead, it became several decades in prison and a death sentence. So, according to those who were present, once Schwebes gave them a stern talking to and left, it was Chris Black who first suggested they fix the problem by telling the others this has to be fixed tonight because tomorrow is a school day, so he's got to die tonight, which truly is as pathetic as it's. I got school tomorrow, guys. He's got to go.
That's so stupid.
Even in the moment, the kids were seriously suggesting that he was willing to kill someone just to not get in the trouble for vandalism and some petty theft. Now, Mark Schwebes, he grew up in Fort Myers, he was a local, and he only left briefly to serve 7 years in the Marine Corps, and when he returned, he took the job as band director at Riverdale High School. And on the night in question, he'd been holding an induction evening, greeting next year's prospective freshmen and musicians. To put it simply, he loved what he did, and he was very good at it. Chris Black admitted that the whole thing was just a throwaway moment, like in rage, he just pissed off, he's got to go. That was it. And unfortunately, though, everybody globbed onto that, and things just got out of hand from there. If they'd been older and more confident, maybe someone, somewhere along the way would have had the balls to say, what the fuck are we doing? We can't kill somebody. But nobody would speak up, and they would go ahead. And unfortunately, in this level escalation of crime, there was no one little thing that went wrong, and they said, "Oh, okay, well, this one actually would
they had no
go
obstacles."
through.
Yeah, it was very similar to how the whole Disney World thing went, like the planning of it. It was like each of these guys were just trying to one up each other by saying something more and more hardcore. Than the last, and then egging each other on. So it was just like a matter of time before it went right.
Yeah, that's it. Unfortunately for Mark, it was. Shockingly, not all of the boys were up for murdering a man for little to no reason at all and took off home. So that just left the core four of Kevin Foster, Pete McNaughty, Derek Shields, and Chris Black. The four of them managed to find Mark's phone number and home address from the school's staff directory, despite it being unlisted. They even made a call to his home to make sure the information was correct and he was there. Then they came up with a plan. Foster immediately volunteered himself as the triggerman, Black the wheelman, Pete the lookout, and Shields would be the one to knock on the door, as they knew Schwebes was his teacher and would recognize him. More importantly, he'd trust him. The boys later told the police that on the drive over to Mark's house, Kevin was literally joyful and was even singing his own version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town. With the lyrics, he sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. You better watch out, you better not cry, you better shut up and prepare to die. Kevin Foster's coming to your house. It's pretty shit.
That was lovely.
Thank you, but the lyrics are quite shit.
Yeah, these guys are so lame. But they all had a really good laugh at this because they really enjoyed the amusing coincidence that Santa was an anagram for Satan.
Wow, dude, you just blow my mind.
It's like serious IQs in the car that day to figure that out.
Can you believe this shit? Bro,
I didn't even think of that. Whoa,
dude. They arrived at Mark Schwebes' house shortly before 11:30 p.m., having swung by Kevin Foster's home to collect a 12-gauge shotgun to do the job. The shotgun had been a Christmas present from Kevin's mother when he was 13.
Jesus.
Which just seems very young to get a shotgun. And now he was going to use it to commit cold-blooded murder. From when they got to Mark's address, pretty much everything went as the murderous gang had intended. Chris Black and Pete McNaughty waited in the car. Derek Shields and Kevin Foster went up to the door where Kevin hid off to the side, and Derek knocked on the door. A few moments later, Mark Schwebes, he opened it. Almost as soon as he did, Kevin darted out and swung the barrel of the shotgun in line with Mark's face, and without any hesitation or a word spoken, he squeezed the trigger, blasting Mark, who immediately dropped to the ground in a fetal position. Mark was very likely dead as soon as that first shot was fired. The damage at that range from a round that powerful would simply have been catastrophic. Just purely for the sake of adding insult to injury, Kevin tracked Mark as he fell to the ground and fired a second shot, hitting his prone and defenseless body in the hip and the buttocks.
The reason that Derek went with Kevin up to the door was so that he could correctly identify that it was Mark Schwebes. However, when the door started opening, Derek, he chickened out, just pulled his cap down and kind of ran off.
Yeah.
But then, without any confirmation, Kevin shot who he believed to be Mark, which it turned out it was Mark. But honestly, he just would have shot anyone who opened the door.
Yeah,
he didn't care. He was out to kill someone.
Absolutely. So for some bizarre and misguided reason, Kevin thought that because the shotgun was a smooth bore weapon, meaning that the barrel of the shotgun, it didn't have rifling on the inside like the barrels of most guns do. So he thought that marks left by the rifling on the bullet, that was the only way to tie a bullet to the gun that fired it. And so therefore, he thought they'll never trace, the shotgun shells I'll leave behind to my shotgun, so he didn't bother to pick them up, and he just left them at the scene. Now, in reality, Kevin was kind of right in that pellets from a smooth bore of a shotgun wouldn't have been able to link to his gun, but ejected shell casings certainly could be linked with a firing pin, breech, and extractor marks, all being forensically unique to the weapon used. So essentially, Kevin didn't think that they could trace the spent shells to his gun. In reality, they could be.
I know nothing about guns, and I figured that out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why he thought that wouldn't happen. He's an
idiot.
He is an idiot, yeah. Police were later called. Neighbors heard shotgun, ring out that night and everything. So 911 was called, and police arrived swiftly. They found Mark lying, just a door open, him lying on the ground. They found he had cash in his pocket, so they quickly ruled out robbery as the motive. The canned peaches and latex gloves the boys had stolen that Mark had confiscated were found in the back of Mark's car, but without any context, the vital evidence was meaningless. The police really had no clue from the beginning anyways to who would have shot and killed Mark at all.
Yeah.
It seemed like a random kind of murder.
And like they actually they discussed making it look like a robbery beforehand. Chris said to the group, he said, like, why don't we make it look like a robbery? We could take his TV, VCR, all of his shit, any kind of jewellery, watch his wallet, blah, 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 blah. And then just tell him to keep his mouth shut about the auditorium. But Kevin said that would take too long. It was then suggested to just steal the car that had confiscated all the evidence in it. Mark drove a older model Bronco, so they said it wouldn't be too difficult to do, to like, you know, peel down the window and get in and steal it. However, Kevin, again, he dismissed the idea, saying he'd never stolen a Bronco before, and it would just be easier to knock on the door so he could shoot.
Yeah.
Like it did, again, like it did.
God,
He was just,
listen, I just gotta shoot him.
He just wanted to kill someone.
Yeah,
That was it, yeah.
Any excuse.
Yeah.
He wouldn't take no for an answer. So the mistake with the shells would end up being a very costly one, as the police, they initially had no idea who was behind Mark's murder. They did focus their investigation on Mark's own love life, but that was after they discovered he was mixed up in something of a love triangle at the school. But it was the extra shot to the downed man was what confused the detectives. It seemed kind of personal and cruel. But the detectives would get a huge break when, on May 3rd, a local teen girl named Julie came to speak with the detectives, claiming she knew who really shot Mark. Julie told them that a day earlier, her ex-boyfriend, Craig Lesh, had proudly confessed to her that while he wasn't the trigger man, he was the one who knocked on the door. Craig Lesh was one of the hangers-on of the Lords of Chaos. Now, obviously, that's complete bollocks. He wasn't at the house at all. Craig Lesh clearly thought, listen, me being a cold-blooded killer, that's gonna real panty dropper, that one. You really, are you impressed? You're supposed to be.
He really knew what the ladies wanted.
Yeah. So the police, well, they went straight to Craig, and he started talking immediately about what really happened and what he had been told by the actual killers of Mark Schwebes.
Yeah, like Craig, he folded like an origami ninja. But he wasn't the only one being far too mouthy about this literal felony the gang had just committed. Pretty much all of them were running their mouths about having killed someone, and it wasn't hard to work out who, considering a beloved member of staff at their high school had just been murdered. Julie, she had also already spilled the beans on everything Craig had told her, including the Lords of Chaos having future plans to commit an armed robbery at Hardy's restaurant in town. Derek Shields and Pete Magnotti, they worked there part-time. So I don't know what it is about these guys and the middle-of-the-road chain restaurants, but...
Yeah, they just love destroying them. Any diners or anything like that they could find.
I hate them. But Lesh, he also put the Lords in the frame for the Coke plant bombing, which up until then, they had no idea that they were involved. Detectives, they immediately got ready to arrest the boys and had actually planned to watch them for a while first, but when it became obvious that they tooled up and were in the car to go and commit the previously mentioned robbery, they cut their stakeout short and they pounced right there and then, taking most of the gang into custody in one swoop and easily sweeping up the rest. So when Kevin was picked up, police, they found the Mossberg shotgun along with several newspaper articles about the gang's activities in town. The articles, they were written by a local reporter named Jim Greenhill, who Foster he would later befriend. And we'll get into him a little bit later.
We'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, Kevin was basically collecting all of the articles this local journalist was writing about the Lords of Chaos, including when they were called like pea-brained cretins or whatever.
Yeah.
He was just mad for the attention.
He loved it, yeah. It's like, no press is bad press, you know?
Yeah.
But ironically, the first to be taken in, Craig Lesh, he was released almost immediately, alongside fellow hanger-oner Brad Young. The two were gobby teenage idiots, but that isn't a crime, and they'd not actually done anything else that they could be charged with, including when the murder was planned, which would have opened them up to, conspiracy charges and such.
Yeah.
But the two detectives interviewing Craig, they done the old good cop, bad cop routine, throwing in words like fingerprints and DNA, and they just caved instantaneously.
Everything, officer.
Your DNA was an exact match.
Oh, jeez. He's the one who peed first.
Yeah. So Chris Burnett and Thomas Taroni both agreed deals to testify for the state against the other members of the Lords of Chaos once they were all rounded up. The two weren't present for the murder, but crucially had heard the opening rumblings of the plan, and Chris Burnett had heard Kevin's boastful confession right after. Burnett also agreed to plead guilty to second-degree arson for his part in the Coke plant bombing, and to armed robbery, for which he would serve 2 years in prison and then 10 years probation. Honestly, it's a pretty good deal, really. Tirone pleaded no contest to the same arson charges and would serve a year inside and then the same 10 years of probation. So all around, Chris and Thomas, they both got off lightly, really, regarding the Lords of Chaos. But the people who were involved in the actual murder did not. Let's get into it. Beginning in March 1997, Peter Mignotti, Derek Shields, and Christopher Black all pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. Peter, having had the smallest role of the four and being present but not doing anything to stop the killing, was given a year in prison for every year of Mark Schwebes' life, 32 years. Derek Shields and Christopher Black had both played active roles in Schwebes' murder, and pleading guilty likely saved them both from a date with the angry buzzing chair, so instead both received life sentences. And now we get to Big Kev. So Lee County prosecutors very generously offered Kevin Foster a similar deal, plead guilty and get life in prison, though he was the one who actually pulled the trigger. Kevin Foster apparently said that life in prison would be far worse than the death penalty and decided he would try his luck at trial. That trial ran from March 3rd, 1998 to March 11th, 1998. With the shells at the scene tying his gun to the crime, and all three of his co-conspirators putting the gun in his hands at the time of the crime, there was really no doubt in anyone's mind that Kevin Foster was guilty and he was heading to death row. That is, despite his mother, Ruby, the person who basically gave him the gun and multiple guns as well, doing her very best and even committing perjury to try and save her son's life. Ruby did testify that Kevin was at home with her at the time of the murder, which the judge and court treated with the disdain and dismissal that such a dismal lie was worth.
Yeah, she was a real piece of work, that woman.
Yeah.
The prosecution, they said that they knew that she was lying from the very start.
Yeah.
Like, her alibi sounded really scripted, and there was just this air of unreality about the whole thing. Like, she had like the perfect time to get him off for these scenarios that they were putting towards us. But yeah.
He was at home from 9:28 p.m. exactly. Yeah, 30 seconds past that. It's like way too, It was on March 11th, 1998. It took the jury a little over 2.25 hours to return a guilty verdict. And then in April, the very same jury returned to the court to decide if Kevin would face life in prison or the death penalty. The vote didn't need to be unanimous, just a majority, and that ultimately sealed Kevin's fate when the jury voted 9-3 in favor of imposing the death penalty, with the judge accepting the jury's decision and sentencing Kevin Foster to death.
They should have given him life. Like, he didn't want life. So
yeah.
Give it to him.
I mean, Kevin got the death penalty, but we'll get into it because he tried to not get the death penalty a lot. Peter Mignotti served out his 32-year sentence and was released in July 2023, just about a year ago. Christopher Black and Derek Shields still remain in prison to this day. The man of the hour, though, Kevmeister, he got exactly what he deserved, the death penalty, though kinda sorta. See, Kevin Foster has been sitting on death row ever since, and naturally, being the narcissistic sociopath that he is, himself and his mother Ruby have tried to appeal his death sentence multiple times, with the latest appeal being rejected in 2023. When Kevin and his mom haven't been writing letters and searching for legal loopholes to help him avoid the death penalty, they've been soliciting journalists to commit revenge murders. Which is not a joke, ladies and gentlemen. This is when the story gets like, it starts out as a dumb teen criminals ultimately committing murder, and then the story just takes a wild turn.
This is the best part in the whole story. It's one of the things, if it was in a movie, I'd be like, it's so unrealistic.
Yeah.
But it really happened.
This really, it's definitely one of those truth is stranger than fiction things. So get this, right? While in jail, like awaiting trial, Kevin had already begun vowing vengeance on Chris Burnett and the others who had testified against him and who would testify against him. As he saw it, they had betrayed him. The other Lords of Chaos were no good. Kevin then had been on death row for less than a year after the trial when he and a journalist named Jim Greenhill, who you may remember Kevin was already a fan of, had been collecting his old newspaper snippets. Kevin and Jim began exchanging some letters. The exchange of letters would stretch for almost 2 years, and throughout it all, Kevin maintained he was far from the killer everybody seemed to think he was. In March of 1999, Jim Greenhill, the man whose articles about the Lords of Chaos Kevin had so proudly kept cuttings of, was invited to meet Kevin in prison and hear Kevin's side of the story. You know, just two sides to every story. Jim was warned by police officers he knew personally, who had previous experience with Kevin and Ruby Foster. Well, they told him to watch his back and keep on his toes. The Fosters were calculating and manipulative. If they were being friendly, they just wanted something. Given that Peter McNaughty had recently told another journalist he thought Kevin wouldn't have killed Mark Schwebes if his pals weren't there to see it, he needed an audience, well, he strived for attention and recognition. And that's what Greenhill thought, that's all Kevin was looking for. That, just like Peter said, he did everything for attention. And so if Greenhill sat down and listened to him, maybe he would learn the truth. But as always, Kevin's true intentions were much, much darker. So Jim was working on a book about the Lords of Chaos and their rampage through Fort Myers, but I'm sure Jim never thought he would become a character in his own story. So Jim's book about the Lords and his experiences with Kevin Foster, it's a pretty good book. Link down below. You gave it a good read.
I did. This part is mentioned, but it was just like a little quick paragraph at the very end. It's like, oh, by the way, this happened.
Oh, really? Yeah. That's crazy. So Jim, an admitted alcoholic and someone with a generally addictive personality, he became kind of obsessed with Kevin and came very close to falling under his spell. Jim Greenhill, he was originally a fella from England who had moved to America, and I think, I could be wrong on this, but I believe he joined up in the American military after this story. During like 9/11, like after 9/11.
Addicted to freedom.
Addicted to everything, it seems, including almost becoming a mass murderer. So another bizarre link between Kevin Foster and Jim Greenhill was that Jim Greenhill's wife, her name was Dr. Carol Hooser, and she was the medical examiner who had received Mark Schwebes' body after Kevin murdered him. So Kevin and Jim, they ended up forming a really odd and far too close relationship. It started with letters, between the two, sharing memories and sharing experiences. Then it slowly escalated to Kevin asking for photos of Jim's travels. The next step was Kevin asking Jim to wear certain clothes he sent him, which is, that's my favorite part.
It's so weird.
Yeah.
That's so strange.
Put on the clothes that I sent you. Send me a picture.
What's he sending them?
I know. I don't know. I'm saying put on the sexy underwear. It's weird. But step by step, basically, Kevin was building his influence and testing his new follower. Jim was a journalist originally sent to interview him, and became his acolyte. From the outside, it was obvious what Kevin was doing. Kevin was grooming Jim, and people did always say Kevin was, although an idiot, he was very charming, manipulative kind of person.
He must have some magnetic personality, because he did, when you see a photo, he looks like a potato. So you're not being drawn in by that.
Yeah, absolutely. At one point, Kevin arranged for Jim to borrow Kevin's favorite gun. So Kevin was like, here, you can have some of my guns.
Oh, thanks, man.
And finally, just over a year into their relationship, after many visits and countless letters, Kevin finally dropped some of the facade and admitted he did, in fact, kill Mark Schwebes. Of course, it wasn't news to Greenhill, who knew that already.
He's like, yeah, I know, man.
Yeah, it's obvious you killed him.
Well, duh.
It did, however, finally make it seem like Kevin was really, truly being honest with him. And somehow from there, it got to the point that Jim Greenhill and Kevin were actually exchanging fantasies of violence and revenge against those who had wronged them. You can listen to some of their phone calls, and it's really, really sad. Kevin's like, yeah, I'm just a dark psycho who just wants to kill people. And then you hear Jim just be like, yeah, man, join the club. You know what that's like? It's like, what? You're a journalist, some nerdy journalist.
So edgy.
Yeah, it's like, join the club. So naturally, Kevin was all too happy to channel Jim's dark curiosities into being his own weapon of vengeance. So obviously, it's pretty obvious that Kevin had planned the whole thing from the start. And it almost worked, to the extent that Jim went out and purchased weapons. Him and Kevin had discussed killing Christopher Burnett and the others who had testified against Kevin. Which all of this is true. You could, as I said, some of their phone calls are online. You can listen to them. And it shouldn't have any chance of working, but it almost did work. He almost went through it. You can hear recordings of Jim Greenhill on his phone calls with Kevin Foster. You can also hear recordings of Jim Greenhill talking to Ruby Foster.
Right, yeah.
Because she was in it, we'll talk about that in a bit. Yeah. But she was in it, and they're talking about him getting the guns, and she knew all about this whole mass murder. It's in Breaking Bad when Walter White organizes all these people in prison to be killed.
Oh,
it's
kind
of a similar take that Kevin was but Kevin was in prison, organized all these people to be killed.
And he wasn't smart.
But
he did. He literally outlined a plan for Jim to lure Chris and the others one by one to a remote location, a parking lot, and kill them one at a time. So he told Jim to call each target up and tell them that he's a journalist and needs showing around town, offering them $1,000 to spend just a few hours for helping them.
Which is crazy. As far to no journalist would ever offer, A, probably wouldn't offer money, and B, wouldn't offer £1,000.
Right?
B, I'd love
if it's too good to be true, you know?
I love how they would all just show up to the same spot one after another and just like see a big pile of blood on the ground. It's like, yeah.
No, you wait in the car. I'll bring you in a minute.
Yeah. Like, you just put your fingers in your ears, don't listen to the gunshots.
So he'd get them to meet him in an empty lot late at night and then stun gun them and take them to a pre-dug grave in the middle of nowhere and then shoot them. So all of this was recorded on a prison phone call on the 11th of June 2000. Kevin even said Jim could use his favourite gun and wear his necklace. So that's nice.
Yeah, Kev really like grooming him.
Yeah. So Kevin had told Jim also to say, "See you in hell," before he shot him, so that he'd know that Kevin was behind it. So this is the same thing that Kevin had said to Chris when police had pulled him over years earlier on the way to rob Hardy's.
Yeah, when they're arrested for the murders. So "see you in hell" was his catchphrase.
Yeah. Which is it's a pretty common catchphrase.
Exactly. I think they'd be like, huh?
What? Say it again?
So before putting the plan into action, Jim met with Ruby, who revealed she knew everything about the murder plan. She was totally in it, and she wasn't going to stop them. She was there to fix a hole in the plan. See, Kevin's gun, that Colt Commander, that would be traceable. So Ruby was going to get Jim a different gun off the street so it wouldn't come back to them. Interesting. I wonder if they'll ever trace all of these people who are involved in the same case, or maybe murdered by somebody. No, this won't be. They'll never figure out it was us. And just as it seemed like Jim Greenhill was going to go true with Kevin's plan, Kevin pushed it a smidge, it's a titty titch too far, and something snapped Jim back to reality. It's actually wild. So after the betrayers were dealt with, Jim had no problem with that. Kevin was going to have Jim go after the judge who had sentenced him, the jury members, even the sheriff, and all of that, dude. Jim was like, "Grant, happy to do it." Specifically, Kevin told Jim he wanted him to gut the sheriff, which must have made it pretty awkward when Jim was telling this to the sheriff later on. But the problem was, what Kevin pushed it a little too far for Jim was that he had also included the medical examiner, who was Jim's wife. That was when Jim was like, oh, you almost had me. Yeah. Almost had me. You just had to include. If Kevin hadn't said, kill the medical, I don't even know why Kevin would want the medical examiner killed.
I know, right? He just wanted to take the whole system down.
Exactly. But so if Kevin hadn't said, kill the medical examiner, Jim may have actually gone true. I mean, he probably would have been caught before he killed everybody, but still, it's pretty weird. And so when Kevin said that, it was all too much for Jim. He realized he'd been living in the realm of fantasy, and so he talked. That was when Jim just, went to the authorities. He told them everything, all about the revenge plot, all about, the prosecutors who were also to be executed, even about the buildings Kevin wanted to blow up, just like his hero McVeigh. So after telling the prosecutor everything, Jim agreed to wear a wire and he met with Ruby again. He even managed to get her to talk about the whole plot and implicate herself. The recorded prison calls were already enough to nail Kevin to the walls of death row. Ruby was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and sentenced to 5 years in prison, which seems like a very short amount of time.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
When she is on the recordings and was happy to go through with this all.
Yeah, and kill a lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of blow up shit. Yeah. Kevin got redundantly, he got an extra 4 years onto his death sentence, and he was moved to a much more secure and restricted wing of the prison. And Jim Greenhill had a very near brush with death himself. Who knows what would happen to him, but it's really, really wild. So I'm just looking up Jim Greenhill. I just want to make sure that this is true. So he was a journalist who wrote for the Fort Myers local paper. He was from England. He was educated at Dulwich College before coming to America in 1984 and then studying in America. But after that, I just want to check this to make sure that I'm right. He was the subject of a 2-hour NBC Dateline special, When the Killer Calls, which is about this case. Okay, in 2003, Jim took a 6-month leave from the paper and successfully completed basic combat training and advanced individual training with the US Army to become a soldier in the Army National Guard. So he did. Yeah, he did actually join the military in reaction to the events of 9/11. And in fact, he became a sergeant. So he divides his time today between Arlington and Durango, where him and his wife, Carol, who was the medical examiner, call home, and he still writes for various papers and stuff today.
There you are now.
Wild story. He wrote the story of this whole story. Someone Has to Die Tonight, which is the book. Yeah. As Keith says, has basically a little postscript. Oh yeah, actually almost killed a lot of people, by the way. Forgive me. Don't worry about that though. That's not the point of this book. Wild story.
Well, sorry. Yeah, he doesn't actually really get into the whole he nearly done it even.
Which is the wild, because that's the most interesting part of the Lords of
I think
Chaos.
it's super interesting. It's literally at the very end, it's a little chapter. It's more, the way he words it is, Kevin was trying to get him to do this, and then he wore a wire.
Yeah. See, this is the one of those things where it's like,
good chunk of there.
yeah, the subject shouldn't write their own story.
Yeah. In fairness, though, if it happened to me, I wouldn't write about it.
I know. But there you go. So, folks, that is the story of the Lords of Chaos. I hope you enjoyed this. I wanted to cover this one for a while. I came across it a long time ago. I was originally going to make a video of it, but it's just, I found there's just too much here to cover in a video. So I'd never heard of this story before.
Yeah, I never heard it. That was what we spoke about it earlier, but when you said Lords of Chaos, like, cool, death metal, nice.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, it's a different story. And then I read it and I was like, holy shit, it's nearly the same, but equally as awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Thanks so much for listening, folks. Just remember, new episode of the TCP, That Chapter podcast, is out every single Monday manana. New videos on the main That Chapter channel are out every Tuesday, so please give boot a go. And yeah, listen, we'll talk to you next week, or hey, listen, as I always say, it could be tomorrow. Maybe you're listening to maybe you give the podcast a break and then you just bulk down, binge a lot of the episodes. So we might hear from you in a couple of seconds, and we'll get some more of Mike's movie reviews. Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs up my bum. Who knows what's gonna happen in the next episode? But all right, until
That's a super good review.
Yes, exactly. That's the best review.
Get the thumb of up.
Yeah. All right, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you soon.
I'll see ya.
All right. Bye, guys.